To begin, let's make a folder in documents, for example. Let's call it probably MVC, MVC Framework. Yeah, it can be MVC Framework with a slash. Okay, MVC Framework. It will be our main folder for our project. And now let's open this folder, and here the best way to start an MVC is actually do a composer init. So it will create a file with our configurations. Do your own configurations and you will see a file like this. Then this out idea is because I'm using PHP Storm, but what really matters for now is composer JSON file where we have our composer configurations. So we need the MVC, so we will start doing a source folder, and here we will create three main folders. The first one will be the M on MVC, that is models, then views, and now for the C, controllers. Okay. Right now we can say we have an MVC architecture in our project. Okay. Our framework works, first of all, it actually receives routes. So let's create a PHP class with the name router. Okay, this will be our main class for handling routes. Okay, like API routes or view routes. Can be anything actually. I will start a namespace. I will call it MVC. I don't have the vendor autoload yet in my composer, but well, we will talk about this later. Right now I will focus only in the code. What we need in our router. We can start with routes array. Okay, this is just an empty array for now. We will actually add our routes in this array. Then we need a function to handle or add routes to our array. Okay, and we will say we will receive a route, a controller, and an action. So this is really familiar for everyone who use Laravel. This is how Laravel actually instantiate routes. So we will try to do almost at least the same thing with in a simple way. So now to add this, we use this route. We will start an object with a route, and then it will be equal to an array with a controller and the action. So this will actually I will call it controller, and the second parameter of this object will be action. Action. So right now we have our routes object, but this is not sufficient. We add the route, but we need to dispatch these routes. So let's create a function to dispatch these routes. So I will call it just dispatch. Okay. And here I will receive the URI, okay, that we want to dispatch. And here I will check if this URI exists in our routes array. So let's say array key exists. This can receive a string that is our URI, and our array, this will be routes. So exactly what we need to do now. If it exists, we want to get the controller and the action from routes, so we can start using that route. So the controller will be our controller parameter, and action our action parameter in the routes array. So after that, we need to start our controller, okay? And simply I will use PHP to do this, and we will do a new controller, and then the controller will call the action that is added to our route. So he will dispatch the action in the controller. If the URI doesn't exist in our routes, we should throw an exception and say no routes found for this URI. So this looks cool. We have a dispatch. So now to dispatch routes, so now we need a controller to handle our controller. So I will start the class with the controller. Realize that these files are outside of our MVC folder structure. Okay, we are not yet doing our application. We are just focused on handling things. So our controller, we need to the main function will be render our views, right? So I will start a function that calls render, and it will receive a view and the data we want to render in that view. So the first thing, we will extract that data, okay, that will be sent for our render, and then we will include our view, right, with that data. So let's say we want to include views at our folder, okay, and our view. So we are explicitly saying that our views are in the folder views, and it will be end in PHP .php to the PHP file. So right now we have our render function to use controllers and render our data to our view. So right now we need to handle the data, and that is creating a model. So let's say we want a user model, because we want user data, and this will start at least two main variables, that is name and email. Okay, we want to construct these two variables, so I will start a construct function, pass these two variables. Okay, and this name will be name, and this email will be email. I will just let this as is the edit. So right now we have a controller, we have a router that to handle data, we have our model with data. Now we can jump to our controller. So let's say user controller. In our controller folder, realize our namespace are adding automatically, because PHP Storm is suggesting that, and I'm accepting it, and I want that namespaces. So what we need here, we need our index function, right? So let's say public function index, and here what we need, we need our data, right? So let's start using our user model and create an object with two users, so John Doe and Jane Doe. Okay, we are not using that database. This is just a simple example. Here we can use the model to connect to a database and use the database, but we are not doing that. But right now I need to extend our controller to use our render function, right? Here we will use our render function that we create in controller, and we will say, look, this view will be, every time you open index action, we want to render our view that is inside of users folder in views. Okay, so and it will call, and the name of the view will be index, and we will pass our data, that is an array with the object user. Okay, let's call it users and our variable users. So right now we have our data in our controller, and we want to render that data to our user index view. So the next step will be, I have everything, so we can start our view. So we start doing a folder called user, as you see in the render function. Then I will do a file name that calls index, and here we will have our HTML render HTML, okay, where we are adding a user list. So let's have a title of user list, actually create a page, and now the lists. And here is PHP, where I'm using our users data, and in a loop we are just list the username and the email. Okay, so what we need now is we need to create a routes file, okay, where we define our routes, right? Right now we don't have a place where we say that we have a slash, imagine we want slash users. What do you need to do? We don't have that yet, so we need to add that routes in our route function in our router file. So let's start a router variable. I will replace this with an alias. I don't like this. I want this just as router, and I don't need this. Okay, so right now we have our router, okay, and we want to add our route and then dispatch this route. Okay, so router, exactly, that's our router add route, and here I will just say slash will be in our user controller. I want to call our user controller, and this will be class, and our action that will actually be index. So right now I add the route that is slash. Every time I open a browser, it will actually use our user controller index function. So this I will import this as user controller, and I don't want this alias. Okay, so we have our main route added. So right now what we need to do is dispatch it, right? So let's use the dispatch function that we created earlier. And this will be actually first we need our URI from our server, but the route we are trying to access. So let's use server, and here will be a remote URI, request URI. Okay. So now I think we have everything we need to dispatch. Let's do router dispatch URI, dispatch, and we will say URI our. So right now, because we add the route, if we access the /route, it will open our controller, our index function. It will render our data to a view where is our HTML. This will not work because we don't have the namespaces yet, but we will see this right now. So let's try to put this working. So let's start our application using localhost 8000 port and try to see the result in our browser. And as we can see, he didn't find our route in our server. So this is what, because we don't have an index file, I guess. Okay, so let's start not a class. Actually, I need an index file. Okay, and what we need to do here, this is a web application. So the first thing we need to do is we need the autoload because of our namespaces. Okay, we define our namespaces, so we need vendor autoload. Then we need the URI that we are trying to access. Okay, and then what we need to do is actually use our routes to dispatch the route we want to visit. So this is exactly what we're gonna do in our index, our main file index that the web server is trying to access. This is needed. So let's see what happened. Now we have our index. It will say we have a 500, and it will say we don't have the vendor autoload in our project, and is right, we don't install our dependency. So let's do composer and install. Okay, and now we have autoload. So in theory this should work, right? It doesn't, because we need to do a dump to our autoload. Exactly the first actually we need to update our composer with the autoload parameter or object in this case. So we need to add the autoload object in our composer JSON file. Okay, and declare our namespace, that is our MVC, and inside of our source folder. This will still not working for sure, because we update our composer. We need to do a dump autoload, if I'm not mistaken. Exactly, it's still doing the same error. So let's do composer dump to load. Okay, so now for sure this will works, hopefully. Let's see. And it works. We have our MVC application where we are listing users.